Hey everyone, welcome back to Kalay Plants. Me again, Mark. Today we're back at the greenhouse and we're gonna be finally doing the Crassula video that I've been talking about. But first, let's just go over here and I wanted to show something. Shout out, by the way, to our commenter who's always asking me for care tips on West Rainbow. So I'm gonna show you my West Rainbow first. Pardon the noise of the dogs outside. Really annoying, but our neighbors got visitors, got guests, so yeah, that's why they're noisy. So now let's just look. Okay, here it is. Here is our West Rainbow, and this is a rotting Echeveria Starlight. Okay, this is our West Rainbow, and I've been struggling with this plant for a very long time. Okay, looking at it now, seems like there's some burning at the center right there. Okay, but the leaves are kind of firm up here. But yeah, it's a very slow rooter. Okay, it hasn't produced a lot of leaves and it's actually shed a lot of its bottom leaves because I think it's still rooting, but it's very slow to like recover. The leaves are still flappy on this one, and I bought this for a while now. It's been with me for a few weeks, probably a month, but it hasn't firmed up fully. So yeah, that is a struggle with me, this Echeveria West Rainbow. This is actually the variegated version of the PVN, and I have the PVN. Okay, I've been watering. I'm waiting for them to dry out, and I'm not gonna give them full sun. It's really noisy right now. Look at this. Look at this really fat Pachyphytum Sky Beauty. Isn't that so nice? And now, here is our West Rainbow, and here is our Pearl von Arnberg. I have struggles with Pearl von Arnberg before as well. I've had it like several times and I keep killing it. I can say that this one really is a very thin-leafed Echeveria. You want to add a lot more organic materials into its potting mix and water it more frequently, especially once it dries out. The bottom leaves like get very wilted very quickly. Let me just bring it up. So yeah, the leaves get very wilted very quickly like that if you leave it dry for a very long time, which is why I would not recommend you leave this dry. And I think that's the same with the West Rainbow that we have, because it's the same plant. It's just a variegated version, and even because of the variegation of that one, it makes it even more like difficult to care for, because variegation on succulents makes the plant grow slower because it has less chlorophyll to produce food. So it's much harder to keep alive, or you might have to be more attentive with your greenhouse, with your space. You want to give it filtered light. You can see the one that I have is burning a little bit. It's getting a lot more direct sun in my place. Okay, so yeah, I'm hoping that it will just root up, but this is not a very comprehensive care guide. Okay, just water it more often and add a lot more organic materials into its potting mix, and then be mindful of where you put it. So that's what I would recommend on this West Rainbow. Okay, so they sound like they're really having a blast over there because the tourists are not from here. Okay, so here are our stacking Crassulas that I've been talking about, and I want to make a care guide on them quickly. I would say that they act like the West Rainbow. They are kind of confusing at first, but once you get the right potting mix for them, and once you get the right sunlight for them, they will just grow very quickly. Okay, that's what I would say. So let's go over them one by one. I'm gonna be sharing their differences in their appearance, and then later on I'm going to be talking about the care tips. Okay, so this is the first one. This is being sold as a variegated Rupestris on the highlands. Okay, but I don't think it's variegated. I think that's just the natural color of the plant. It's really stunning. It is, I believe, related to the high voltage. I will just post the name on the screen. This is the high voltage that we have. This is kind of like the same plant, but it has different, like it's been cultivated differently. So this one gets more red, but this one doesn't get that far. But you can see that they're really stunning. What I experienced with this high voltage, this Rupestris, I think, is that it's very difficult to root for me when I first had it. So what I did, I removed the bottom roots that is dried up, and then I took off some of the bottom leaves from the cuttings, and then I plopped it back into the soil, so hoping that it will reroot on its new nodes. Okay, I really don't want to show it. This is the only high voltage that I have, by the way. So let me just like take this stem to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is a cutting of the plant, and you can see here this is the bottom nodes. Okay, where the leaves attach to the stem, that is the node, and you can see it has a root. Okay, it kind of has a root right there. Okay, you can probably see it. Okay, so that means that the plant is rerouting, because when I took it off, the bottom part of the plant, the roots that it had were dried up and it wasn't alive anymore. So I think that the plant is not drinking, so the plant is no longer like good with those roots. So I took off the bottom roots, and then I took off the leaves at the bottom nodes, and then I plopped it back into the soil. So that's what you can do probably if your crassula is not rooting up, it's not establishing, it feels like it's always dry. So you can do that. Probably the bottom roots are dead. Okay, and the plant isn't just producing new roots at the top, so you just have to cut it off and let it produce new roots. Okay, so that is a risk with these stacking crassulas, but they don't happen often. But when they do, you will notice that your plant wouldn't like plump up even if you water. Same goes with this one, the crassula tom thumb. This is really like purple right now and ugly. Okay, this is really stressed. I've had this for a long time. This is actually the result of two plants drying up, and I combined what remained of them into one pot like this one. You can see that it has very dried up leaves. Okay, I have been watering this more often. Okay, I would recommend that you water these small leaf crassulas more often, and don't give them like full blasting sunlight, because if you do, they will just like wither up and die. So yeah, I would recommend you give them more filter. They're here at this part of my greenhouse, which gets much more filtered light, and they get much more shadier much more quickly compared with my other sections. Okay, so this Crassula Rupestris, okay, is one of the plants that I put here so that it's much more protected. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. And also make sure that their nodes, once you plant them, will touch organic material and not pure pumice. They will not root up in pure pumice. I would recommend that you add more organic materials. The smaller the leaves, the higher the amount of organic materials is what I would recommend. Okay, other people will generalize their potting mix because they don't want to do it over and over again, but you want to generalize only on crassulas and not with all of your succulents. Okay, some crassulas will really appreciate a lot more organic material, and succulents like this one, like the Caberias, they would recommend I would recommend a lot more pumice on them. Okay, okay, so where are we? So now we're gonna talk about this fantasy, Crassula fantasy. This is, I think, a variegated tom thumb, or another variety that is variegated. It gets much more fatter leaves than this one. This is just not fat enough yet because it's still rooting up, but you can see all the pups that it has produced. So what it did with the few roots that it had before, it managed to produce a lot of these pups. So I think it's a very reliable succulent. It did well. It did much better compared with the other two crassulas that we have right there. Okay, so yeah, I would highly recommend it. The seller of this one is the Succulent Bucket on Facebook, so you can check them out, this plant in specifically. Now we also have this one. This is another like stacking crassula that I would really say that this one looks like a barbecue. Look at the amount of pups that has produced right there. Really, really nice. And you can see here the problem with this plant is that once it gets too hot, it will burn like that. Okay, but you can see the fresh growth is much more beautiful, much more better. So if you can manage to make your plant grow quickly, then you will see your older leaves being replaced by new ones. So you won't have to worry about that anymore. But if you really want to like get rid of those, you can cut it up into pieces. Okay, I would recommend like cut this long stem into like 2 or 3 cuttings, remove the bottom leaves, and then find a node and then stick it into the soil, and you will see that the new growth that it will produce will be much better looking than the old leaves that it has. Okay, so that is a way to make your succulents beautiful. Okay, but this one has been growing pretty quickly for me, and this one isn't that much sensitive compared with your other thicker leaf succulents, so I really like this one. Okay, I will just be posting the name on the screen. Okay, this one is another fussy one for me. This is the Crassula brevifolia. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you can see the leaves that it has is much more red. Really nice. I really like the look of the leaves on this one. Really fat, yes. And this is a Korean succulent. I bought this from overseas from a Korean seller. Okay, so you can see there. You can see the leaves on that one. Really nice, and I like the margins on it, like on the top layer of the top edges of the leaves. You can see some nice margins. Really nice and really adorable. And this can get long and trailing once it grows, but yeah, I'm not there yet. Recently this has been like drying up its tips. Okay, you can see here there's no more tip anymore. There are no more tips on this one anymore. Okay, and on this one as well, it had dried up, but you can see the new growth at the center. Like those are new leaves ready to come out. Okay, so those are really nice. I think why it dried up those tips, because I repotted it into a much more organic heavy potting mix. So I think that it's just rooting up. So yeah, I'm hopeful that this will just establish itself right in this potting mix and we can see more growth on it. Okay, the really the time that they will look ugly is when you are establishing them, when you are rooting them. But once they're established, they grow very quickly. Okay, that's what I would say. Another one that I have been struggling, this is also rooting up because I repotted it. This is variegated Crassula, okay, Perforata. So you can see the variegation on the new growth, the new leaves on there, really nice, really light in color. But if you like made a mistake or something, this will happen, this will dry up. Okay, so this probably isn't rooting very well, so it must have like dead roots at the bottom. So we will see. I will still check on that plant, but I will water it first because it's very dry right here in this potting mix. Okay, yeah, but I really wanted to like make a big pot of these Crassula because I like the look of them when they are lush. So I planted them in a large container. So that must have been a mistake because they haven't been fatting up for the longest time. You can see the leaves are still wilted. So yeah, that will happen if you overpot your Crassula. Like if you put them in too big of a pot, they will not establish quickly because they have a lot of potting mix to cover and they will need to produce a lot of roots for that. So yeah, I would recommend that you buy a large Crassula if you want to put it in a large pot. But if you have like a small Crassula, just put it in smaller pots and let them establish first before you move them up. So yeah, that's another one I recommend. And these two are the ivory towers and the Cugayensis that I have been sold. The Cugayensis, the seller has been searching for the name because he said that the leaves on this one is very different. You can see on the new growth, probably on the old growth as well. You can see here, okay, can get the camera to focus, huh? Okay, this is the new leaves that it has, and if you put it up, okay, right here, okay, you can see the leaves on those are much more thicker compared with the ivory towers, which has like a Rupestris style leaf. Okay, this one has thin leaves. The ivory towers also has thin leaves, but the Cugayensis is much more thicker leaves. So that's what the seller told me, and it has also much more prominent margins. Okay, when I first bought it, the margins on this one were much more prominent than currently. Okay, this is the ivory towers, by the way. But I think though there is some doubt in me because I think that they are kind of the same. So yeah, I'm still wondering what to make of it because yeah, this one started to producing thick leaves as well. But yeah, you can see it's still not as thick as this one. Okay, and the leaves on this one is much more wider. Looking at it on the pups. Yep. Okay, so there's that. So now this one used to have a long stalk and I took it off. Let's just go over. Okay, so here it is. This is why I have been recommending like you cut off the stems because look how nicely they propagate. Look at that. Look at those pups coming up out of that long stalk. Okay, this used to have a long stalk and I said I cut it off into pieces. Okay, so for example like this one, this is already a very long stalk. You can do this probably if you buy a long stalk along Crassula barbecue already. This plant had this type of growth, so I took off like sets of 3 leaves, and then I took off the bottom leaf, I ripped it away, and once I took it off, the stem that is remaining on the bottom side, that's what I plop into the soil to establish the root, and that's what I did with this one. So you can see here, if you look closely, you can see where I cut off the stems. Okay, I think there are 4 leaves right here on this cutting, and this is the tip, and yeah, it has produced a lot of pups on the top. Okay, but what I also did with these ones, this still had leaves on top of it, like this one. Okay, you can see here, this used to have another leaf, so I took off the other one and I kept the other one because the pups were appearing under the leaf. Okay, so these pups, you can see this has 4 pups on this head. It was appearing under the leaf and I didn't want it to get squeezed by the leaf, so I removed the top leaf, and then they're now coming up out of the removed leaf part. Okay, so that's what you can do. Really nice growth on this one, and I'm hoping like I will separate this one and I will sell it later on once I manage to grow it a little more. Okay, really adorable. So you can see that once you establish them, they will just really grow up. They will just grow very quickly, and they will just produce new growth. Okay, so now on to our care tips. I would recommend, as I said before, you add a lot more organic materials into their potting mix because they are very fast growers and they're very thirsty plants. They don't want to stay dry for a long time. You have to water them much more often compared with your thicker leaf Echeveria. So the thinner the leaf of the plant is, the more attentive you should be on their watering, because those thin leaves could like get very ugly very quickly. They will not plump up if you don't water them often, and sometimes you will risk the problem that is root death, which I said before is the time when the roots don't absorb water anymore. So when that happens, you just cut it off, as I said. Okay, also give them filtered light. I would recommend it if you have a hot area in your place. If you can give some filter on them like in the middle of the day, then you can get more success with them. Okay, because they don't like to grow in blasting hot sun. They will burn very quickly and they will dry up as well. So yeah, that's what I would recommend with Crassulas. With the fungus, I haven't had a fungal issue with these stacking type of Crassulas. Okay, compared with those other softer type Crassulas, okay, you can get fungus on those like very textured leafy Crassula. On the jade plants, those are Crassulas as well. I haven't also had the issue with the rotting that I get with campfire. Okay, they usually dry up, not rotting. Okay, not that much. Okay, those are very resilient when it comes to watering, by the way. And with these ones, with these stacking Crassulas, that is also not a problem. The watering, the overwatering, the rotting. So you can still overwater them. Probably they will still do badly if you overwater them, but when it comes to rotting, yeah, I haven't seen that issue with these plants. I think your main concern with them is drying up and not rotting. That's what I would say with this type of plants. Okay, but I think that's about it for our mini care guide on our stacking Crassulas. Okay, I will still propagate this later on. I still have to figure out a lot of things about them, so I will probably share an update on them later on. Okay, please make sure to subscribe so that you won't miss those updates. But yeah, I think that's about it for this video, guys. Please make sure to hit the thumbs up if you haven't already, and if you like the tips that we have, and also make sure to share our videos to your fellow friends who are struggling with their plants as well. But I think that's about it for this video. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.